Well, hey, I'm so excited to be with my friend today, Captain Don Bosch. Don, it is great to see you today.
Hey, Travis, it's awesome to be here, man. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Me and you have been friends for a while now, and I've just been thinking about the intersection between what can a worship leader learn from a military captain? And I think you have some great insights. You teach on leadership at Liberty University. Give us just a little bit of a snapshot of your career in the military so we have an understanding of where you're coming from.
Great. Well, Travis, is a real honor to be here, and I love what you're doing. So keep the podcast going. Years ago, back in the '80s, Top Gun came out, and the Navy looked like a great place to go when I got out of college. So flew for a while on the Enterprise and Lincoln as a backseat guy, and then ended up in the early '90s, transferred into the reserves during kind of that downsizing that we all went through in the '90s, and then um, it was kind of just good advice. So I had this parallel track where I was working for the government and the Navy as a military civilian guy, and then just kept giving reserve jobs. We lived in Japan for a while, and then we moved back to San Diego, and then I had a privilege of going to the War College for about 10 years. Some of that military time and some of that was civilian time. And then while I was there, I got mobilized to Africa for a year on the Joint Task Force down there and got to lead a big group of folks there. And it was just a real honor to do that in a really cool, challenging place, and kind of opened up my eyes to see, that part of the world, Africa and Europe and so forth. Finally retired after a couple of neat jobs at the Pentagon. They finally dragged me there, kicking and screaming. And then Millington, Tennessee, with recruiting, and I finally retired in 2017. So it's been neat. I was active and then reserve, and then I was also Navy Civil Service, and did all of that for a total of about 30 plus years. I never thought it'd turn into a career, but it's been fantastic. And the big thing about I'm looking for tonight is lots and lots of really, really solid leaders and a handful of really awful leaders, because you'll learn from both, right? Can I
Right.
get a witness?
Absolutely.
So that's about it.
Absolutely. Well, the first thing I got to say, thank you for your service. Thank you
Yeah,
so much for what you've done with your life to keep us safe and free. I've just loved getting to know you, Don. These last couple of years, our lives have intersected because we attend the same church, Liberty Life Church
hmm
in Hampton, Virginia, and we've been serving together in the same worship ministry. And you're a phenomenal bass player,
Ah,
and uh, and now you're my small group leader. And it's been so great to just get to know you not only as a musician but also as a spiritual leader in my
hmm.
life. And I know that as we've been talking, I've just been so fascinated just because you teach on this topic of leadership. You're a guru on this topic. And I thought, man, it would be great to do an interview. What can a worship leader learn from a
Hmm.
military captain? So I want to start off with this question. I know in your teaching, you talk a lot about how leadership is really about mastering tools. What are
Hmm.
one or two essential leadership tools you believe every worship leader should have in their tool belt?
Yeah, great question right off the bat. And I loved you as a leader also. So this is really cool because we've
Too
kind of
kind.
had been in the driver's seat a couple of times. So the first tool is knowing you have tools. I think a
Hmm.
lot of people will step into leader positions. They don't realize they have options, right? They're just
Hmm.
kind of looking around. So this idea of knowing what different leadership styles are.
Hmm.
There's kind of that executive style, front office. There's kind of a coaching style. There's a collaborative. Let's get everybody together and solve the problem, or write a song, or whatever it is. Um, and some of them are just pace setting. Hey, just keep up. I'm going to lead the way. So that's the first point. And the second behind that is realize you don't have to live with one. And in
Hmm.
fact, there's this thing called situational leadership where good leaders will say, okay, I need this kind of style right now. And they're comfortable shifting gears and putting your in different contexts and with different people and different leadership situations. So that's two things. One is realizing you should have your tool belt with lots of different options. And then not every hammer is a sledgehammer. Sometimes it's one of those little tack hammers. You got to
Can,
get
can
the right
you
size one.
can you go back to those four types and just tell us just a little bit more about how they're different from each other?
Yeah. So let's take a rehearsal, right? So
Sure.
you've got plenty of time. Let's say old school Wednesday night rehearsal or Thursday nights, whenever we used to meet. and you got like 2.5, 3 hours. Everybody's in a good mood. It's the end of the day. It's very collaborative. You're working
Mm,
on things together. Oh, let's add this in there. Maybe you're writing a song as a group. Let's say you've got 30 minutes. It's 6:45 in the morning. You have to be off stage by 7:15 or something. You're very directive now.
mm,
We don't have time to fool around. We're going to run through this. Okay, second, you cut everybody off. Okay, we hit the intro on that. Let's go to the next song. Um, you look across and you see somebody struggling. Do they need coaching because they're still learning how their in-ears work or they're learning the instrument or something? Or do they just need encouragement? They got it. They understand it. They just need, that's a confidence thing. They're just trying to, and all they really need is that, hey man, you got this. So I think those are some examples of where being a leader is really tuned into his people. We're going to talk more about that, I think. But the key is having those different gear changes as you need them, for the right kind of people so that you're not going after somebody that doesn't need it. At the same time, you're really not helping somebody that does need it because you know, you're not in your coaching mode. I don't know if
how does
that's
yeah, no, how
helped,
does a
but
leader develop? Going back to the first example, I know from the creatives that I've worked with, sometimes it's a hard bucket for them to create in their mind that they can go from, a collaborative feel in a rehearsal to we need to be done and I need you to lead the stage. Like that can be really a hard shift.
yeah.
Where does the confidence and the authority and the ability to develop that come from?
Yeah, I think it comes maybe with experience and the first thing a leader, the know thyself a little bit. There's this idea of personal leadership. Um, just like you're looking around the room and you're looking at everybody says this variety of skill and I kind of know where everybody's at. Where am I at spiritually? Do I have my feet under me on this piece of music? Did I spend as much time as I really wanted on it preparing? Do I have my MD stuff down? I could have spent more time on that, but I didn't. I think good leaders will sort of fess up, and
Mm,
you and the other guys that I've seen doing that kind of go, man, it's a struggle right now. The technology's fighting us. Just be patient, So I think it's just being real. You and I the other day we were riding in the car. We were talking about authenticity,
mm,
right? So I think it
yep.
goes back to that. And so knowing yourself and well, one other thing I'll add on the leadership style, everybody's really good at one of those. There's some people that are just phenomenal coaches, right? That can make a living at it. They may have really struggle with some of those other kind of styles. There's some people that are really, really good at executive leadership, like Dr.
Hmm.
Costin, the head of Liberty University,
Hmm.
very focused. Bunk, bunk, bunk. You and I talk about Pastor Grant as being,
Hmm.
he's a great executive. There's guys that are
Hmm.
just really good at that.
Hmm.
So knowing those skills, knowing when you're a fit, I prefer collaborative style. It's kind of my thing. That's where I'm the most comfortable. And so you kind of start there and then you add those other tools just through experience, I think.
As we get to understand these tools, how can these tools help in managing diverse personalities on a worship team? Because you and I both know that when you're in a church, it's not every personality is cookie cutter. There's a broad diversity
Yeah.
of
And musicians are
personalities.
funny, right? Some people approach music really technically. Drummers are kind of like that. A lot of bass players. I'm really enjoying the gadget side of it, the technical side. Some people are much more creative, the singers and a lot, and they're kind of looking for that. And they're more up in the front. How do I connect with folks and things like that? I think you talk to people, right? And
Hmm.
I think one thing that a good leader will do, it sounds kind of quaint, but know your people, right?
Yeah.
So you're not going to get that in a 5-minute soundbite in the green room. Take them out to breakfast, buy them some pancakes. Where are you from? Why are you here? What are you doing this? We do that in the interview process because we want to, screen. I think that's an ongoing, if you're not touching base with everybody at least once a cycle and kind of checking in with them more than a 5 minute, even if it's just walking back to the worship center with a cup of coffee and just kind of catching up. The more you know your people, the better off you're going to be at leading them, I think.
I think you had some really great wisdom in delineating between two types of creatives. I wholeheartedly agree with you. When you were talking about like the technical creative, it reminded me that I had a mentor when I was young. His name was Jody Cross.
Mm,
And I was different from him in this way that Jody, you know, if he was struggling with like where to come in with his part or when to start singing, he would like want to count it out and he
mm,
would write how many measures there were, and it
mhm,
was all calculated. And the more I got to know him, I found out, well, he's got a real mathematical brain. Like
mhm.
that's just how God wired him to be. Whereas I'm just like, let's just feel it out. You're
Just
going to be
feel
able
it.
to feel
Right.
the crescendo, and it's just going to feel right. You know,
Yeah.
everything in music usually happens in 4 bars, 8 bars, 16 bars, 32 bars. You know,
Yeah.
you're just going to feel it. But he was always insistent on counting it out. And I think it's important for creatives to know that you know neither way is wrong. It's just two
Mm.
different. It's just two different ways. And would you not agree that a great leader is able and willing to detect that and to shift into that
Yeah.
mode and communicate?
Absolutely. That goes to how you learn music.
Mm,
Some people are. It took me a while to learn Nashville, but now that I've got it, Greg Varner was MDN last Sunday, and he was giving me, "Hey, I need the A," and I'm like, "I don't even know what an A is anymore. I know
it's
it's
a
a two.
good Canadian chord.
Yeah, A." Take off. So there's you, you can switch back and forth, I think, left brain and right brain. But yeah, there's some people that the only way they learn this song is by, looking through the notes. There's other people that have to kind of connect with, with it musically. And leadership's that way. You'll have some guys that flying was like this. For some guys, that were flying around the boat, and it was very, very technical. My brother was a bomber pilot, flew in the Navy, followed me in the Navy, and he flew A6 intruders, and we used to call him Buckethead. He had a double major in electrical engineering and math from the University of Washington in 5 years, and he was just the smartest guy I know. Flies for United now,
Hmm.
and he's a 16th of an inch square corner guy, and then there's other people that approach. We had this guy named Float, that was his call sign, and he would fly, and everything was always by the seat of his pants, and he was a phenomenal pilot, but everything was right brain with him, man. It was just,
Hmm.
we're gonna get there. Don't worry about it. So I think you can lead both styles, but it's really helpful to know who's who.
Yeah. Yeah. No, knowing where your gear shifter is and being able to
Hmm.
shift to communicate in those. Dr. Bosch, you know,
Yes, sir.
when you teach on leadership, you
Uh-huh.
talk about leadership molds like directive, collaborative, and
Yeah.
coaching. In a worship ministry setting, what modes do you think are most effective and when should they be used?
Yeah. Kind of like we were talking about earlier. I think yeah, that leader has to look at the situation and figure out what gear you got to be in. Um, I had a great opportunity, kind of thinking about this idea of emotional intelligence.
Hmm.
And how does that come into it? So I ran into Goldman at the Navy postgraduate
Oh, no
school. I
way.
was
That's
taking a
awesome.
taking a course out there, not him personally, but his article.
Oh,
And
okay.
I would love to meet him. Yeah, he's at Harvard, right?
Yeah.
He he talked about this connection between your upper brain, what he called, your thinking brain, and your lizard brain, which he
Hmm.
called like your lower emotional brain,
Hmm.
right? And that they're wired together. And so the first thing that he said that blew me away was that flow goes both ways. And I tend to be a little bit more right brain, emotional, internal driven. And I thought I just have to put up with whatever my lizard brain is doing to me. So if I'm concerned or upset or happy or whatever, I just kind of overwhelmed by that. And I didn't realize I could talk to myself and say, hey, just settle down, right? Or be cool. The second thing was, which is huge, is that your lizard brain, your emotional, is networked.
Okay.
So everybody in a room, and you know this, right? So when somebody, a violinist, it's like Perlman, gets up there and he's playing, everybody in the whole room is moving with him.
Mm.
Everybody's connected emotionally to that music. So there's this intellectual thing going on where he's thinking of the notes and thinking what he wants to play, and then transmitting that out over a network. So here's how this works on a Sunday morning. We had a little church up at the War College, and every Sunday morning we'd get up early. We were all coffeeed up, we were prayed up, and by the time we're kind of awake after rehearsal, we're into what's going on, we're excited, right? And then what happens is everybody comes in, they open the doors, right? And it's moms and dads with kids who've been crying, and nobody's getting
Sure.
along, and they're all half asleep, and they're not where you're at, right? Spiritually, emotionally. So we would start the music, and it was like the air let out of a balloon. And I said, I wonder if this Goldman thing is like real, right?
Hmm.
So I talked to the team at the break, and I said, here's what we're going to do. I told them that Goldman story. I said, we're going to plant our feet spiritually, emotionally, and musically. And we are not going to, we're going to recognize that we're going to connect with everybody. But instead of letting them pull us off the stage down to where they're at, we're going to think about how we're going to bring them up to where we're at,
Mm.
right? And use that leadership, the emotional intelligence and the connection, and be deliberate about how we're thinking about what we're doing and what our intention is for the congregation. And we're going to bring them to where we're at. Next set kicks off absolutely night and day. I
Really?
kid you not. And from then on, it was a different music program, only because we were thinking differently about the leadership and the musical and emotional connection we had with the congregation. It was crazy. I would not have believed it.
It's incredible just how perspective can change and how it can change all of those things. Anything else related to applying emotional intelligence that you would advise to worship leaders as they go week in and week out leading rehearsals? You said earlier, know thyself. And I've always
Hmm.
felt like the greatest liability any worship leader has is a lack of self-awareness. But
Yeah.
anything else that you'd want to mention when it comes to like self-awareness in a leadership role on a Sunday morning or at a
Yeah.
rehearsal?
I, so you can practice this,
Hmm.
right? You can be deliberate about how you think about uh, other people and how you're connecting with them, and whether it's the person behind the counter or the waitress, or people in your office space that you work with. Anybody that's worked with people long enough to know realizes you can walk into a room and you can get an idea of what sort of the tone.
Hmm.
What you also know is there are leaders, when they walk in a room, everybody goes, Bob is here or something. And
Sure.
all of a sudden, everybody's sort of oriented, the attention's on them. So there's a great book Goldman finished with him. He wrote a book called
Intelligence.
Yeah, he wrote Primal Leadership.
That's right.
Yeah, I really recommend that. And he talked about that idea of connecting and then deliberately moving people. And you have to have both. You can't just start driving the herd, right? You have to connect with everybody first. So you got to meet them where they're at. You say, okay, and you got to know where you're at. Maybe it's been a tough day for you, and maybe just being real and acknowledges, man, we're all kind of out of gas this morning, and
Hmm.
just being authentic,
Yeah.
connecting everybody up, and then saying, okay, now that we're all sort of synced up, let's pray. Holy Spirit, move all of us in the right direction. And so, as a leadership activity, you're not just trying to sort of inspire them or anything, but realizing that there's a God has created a very real dynamic of connection among people. And,
Hmm.
and I think musicians are highly tuned to that. At least we
Yes.
should be, right?
Yes.
Connecting with one another. The teams that I led in Africa and in DC and else, you come in the staff in the conference room, and we're having a sit in our first down meeting. It's probably been a while, and the first thing I would usually do is, how's everybody doing? That's We don't have to go around the room. You don't have to spare your soul. Where are we? One more quick story. My dad had a Bible study. He's passed now, but for about 40 years. And it was these same dozen guys or so that got together. They were all sort of professionals, and they were all kind of at the top of their profession. They were kind of lonely guys on their
Mm.
own,
Mm.
but they loved to get together over pancakes. And they went around the room and they had a scale of 1 to 10,
Hmm.
right? 1 is Job, 10 is, you know, just got my pilot wings and I'm heading off to go fly it, right? And all they had to do is, I'm a 6 today. Okay, great. I'm a 7. Why is that? And they could share, but it was a quick way for
Read the
them to
room.
Yeah, read the room, but also to offer up where they were at to sort of, they wanted to get that quick connection out of the way. So, because they knew they needed that together. And then,
Hmm.
and that was a good leadership tool for them. So I think goes back to, yeah, you can connect. And there's various ways of doing that. And everybody's going to be in a different place, but you can be deliberate about that. You don't have to just kind of hope that that happens.
Yeah, I love that. The intentionality to go into
Mhm.
discovering that.
Exactly right. Yeah.
When you teach, you talk about the difference between vision and focus.
Mm,
How can a worship leader stay true to a kingdom-centered vision while
yeah.
also executing just the week-to-week tasks of
Yeah.
ministry with
Oh
great
man.
clarity and excellence?
So it's such a great question. So Stephen Covey, remember him, the Seven
Oh yeah, Seven
Habits guy?
Habits, highly
So he told
effective.
this
Yep.
great story about these guys are going through the jungle, right? And they got the people who are the machete sharpeners and the people who are bringing water to the hack people that are hacking, and there's people managing and directing, and the leader is the one that climbs up the tree and says, "Hey guys, we're in the wrong jungle." Right? As a matter of fact, there's a cliff. We're gonna
Right.
right go off
We
the
got
cliff.
problems.
And then, of course, the managers are looking up saying, hey, we're making progress. Shut up, leave us alone.
Sure.
So they go back to hack it. It's, you got to have both. A mentor of mine convinced me if you just have a vision, but you don't have any focus to it, it's just pipe dreams.
Mm,
If you have a lot of focus, there's a lot of activity going on, but there's no direction to it, right? You're just spinning around. So the leader is the one that's able to sort of translate for the group. Here's where we want to be musically, professionally, spiritually, maybe in terms of developing, for a Sunday or maybe writing songs or whatever it is. Um, and then here's how we're going to get there, right? Let's look at C-dubs. Let's look at other options for rehearsals, some additional time. Maybe we
yeah,
can
we're
improve.
talking we're talking in code here. I have to
Yeah.
jump in and just say
Okay, go ahead.
CDEBS stands for our Central Worship Workshops, where we're actually coming together as a worship ministry team. We're learning together in a group context.
Yeah. Focus. So let's, picking one of those, it would be strategy and the vision is what's God got going for us, and praying through that and communicating. Here's kind of where the pastor's going in the next couple of months of sermon series. Here's right. We're looking at rolling out some new music. Okay, so got it. And then everybody kind of locks in on that. They got a sense, oh, okay. The great leader now says, okay, there's a couple of things you're going to do. One is you're going to begin to lay out the steps on how you're going to get there. And most importantly, and again, you're great at this, who specifically is going to carry these things out? And you begin to delegate. You begin
Mm,
to look at your leadership within, because your whole goal, another goal as a leader is how are you cultivating other leaders?
right.
And right, vision is the perfect way to do that when you connect it with a focus, because then you can begin to give each person part of that activity that gets everybody in the right direction. So I think that's kind of a key thing we don't always think about. Again, the leader's going to be doing both, and how do you translate between looking way downstream, but also saying, okay, now we got to figure out what's right in front of us too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. In your experience, having led in like high stakes military environments, how did you foster unity and morale on your
Mm.
team? And what lessons from that do you think can be applied to a worship team and volunteers
Yeah.
who may not necessarily share the same level of discipline or mission clarity?
Yeah. Yeah. Because
That
usually,
about that.
yeah, about that. So I think you're touching on the idea that you're not all going to be at the same place, right? Generally, the leader tends to be the one that's a little furthest down the road in experience and maturity, because that's kind of why they're in charge. It's not always the case, but it's often the case.
And if they're a visionary, like if they're,
Yeah,
I don't want to speak for all visionaries, but I know my experience has been like, here we are in August. My brain is in February
right,
2026.
right,
I'm always thinking that far down the road. That's just it. I don't. That's not a badge of honor. It's just how I was
right,
designed. You know.
right. I think it's similar kind of thing. I mean, think about Djibouti. We were in Africa. Um, looking at we're going to be here for the next year. What's kind of our long range plan as we get people that are going to roll in and roll out, and how do we handle all those changes that are going to going on? I think it's Top Gun is kind of I love the new one actually better than the original one just because I'm as old as Tom Cruise is, so I can connect being 60, trying to do this, and the fact that he's a captain and not an admiral, I think it's really great. Um, but it's the uh, the pickup football, right? Knowing when you just need to go out as a group and do, some sort of activity, get, team building. Some people do marshmallows and, pick up sticks and build towers with it, but some kind of fun thing. C-dubs is an example, but so is, Thanksgiving dinner and
Yeah, we would do stuff like that. We
right.
would have Friendsgiving. I one of the things I was big on is like putting pictures of the team up on the wall
Yep.
in the back area just to communicate like this is family, this is intentional.
Yep.
This is about belonging, this is about community. And we would do other things. We'd go to Busch Gardens, once during the summer. But I'm a big fan of fun and just having fun together as a community.
No, yeah. So I think once you realize, oh, I'm kind of doing that already, then it's just kind of, just encourage that behavior. I think working together to figure out your outcomes and getting everybody invested, that's really motivating when everybody kind of not only knows, I know where we're going now, but I've got a piece of that.
Yeah,
When we put our kids in the car and we know we're going on vacation, and if they know they've got activities or things that they're doing, to kind of keep themselves busy, okay, they're part of the solution now instead of us
right.
having to get onto them and things like that. So I think uh, knowing, having clarity and communicating that some of it, sometimes discipline comes in there too, and
Hmm.
you got to discipline both in a positive way and says, hey, let's, the correcting, keep kind of keeping things on track. The rest of the group appreciates that,
Yeah,
quite frankly.
yeah.
And
People always
that
feel great about when their time is respected. If you
that's exactly right.
respect people's time, they're
Yep.
more likely to come back. They're more likely to lean in. They're more likely to absorb what you have to say because they're just like, that guy's going to respect my time.
Yep. So I think those are all kind of whether it's military environment or a worship or a ministry environment or a business environment. I think all those things kind of apply. Sure.
You talk about leading when you're not in charge. And I read a great
Uh,
book with that title by Clay Scroggins back in the day. And I was just thinking, like many worship leaders report to a senior pastor or an elder team.
mhm.
How would you say can they lead with influence and integrity even if they don't have the final say?
Yeah. So if you're in that position where you're not where the buck stops with you, but but
Right,
you still have to find a way to get a bunch of stuff done.
right,
Yeah,
right.
it's age old. So there's lead old axiom. Another I don't know even I heard this from lead people manage things.
Okay.
Lead people manage things. First, I have come to hate the term human resources with a
Hmm.
passion.
Okay. Talk to me about
Human
that.
beings are not resources.
Hmm.
They're gifts from God.
Hmm.
They are people made in God's image.
Hmm.
They're not spreadsheets. They're not names on a to-do list, right? And so our job they deserve to be led, right? God, when he chose his people, he picked really solid guys, and he was very frustrated when he had guys in charge that were not good leaders, and women too, right?
Hmm.
The things that Saul did, and God's like, yeah, it's done with that. Um, so what does that mean? So if you're not the leader at the moment, you can manage well. So you can look at the resources, the time that you have, you can lead within your influence. I think that's when we start talking about developing relationships and partnerships. So you may not have a vertical relationship with the group that you're with, but you certainly have horizontal influence. And you can develop those partnerships and you can get buy-in and you can use your other influence. I had a, a, a colleague, a guy was leading once, and he was really frustrated by this idea of politics. Politics, and he didn't want to do this particular task because it looked like it was. He didn't want to play golf actually with the boss because he thought it looked political, right?
Gotcha.
And then he said, well, there's other guy play golf and he got promoted and I don't want to get promoted that way. And I said, well, if you want to get promoted, where's your clubs, dude?
Mm,
Right. So it was kind of this idea. Politics is just about, in many ways, and it's in a good way, it's developing good relationships
mm,
and making investments in other people so that when you're kind of short and you need some help, then it's sort of that they're willing to make that investment back. What's that emotional bank account? Like uh, one guy has said. So you can be. I think XPs are really good at this. Executive pastors. They're not, Pastor Scott. They're not that guy out in the front. They're not the leader of the pack, but they are able to exert a lot of influence because they're really good at managing resources and leading the people that they have in their organization to do a good job with that. So I think you can influence that way. So that goes back to this idea of delegating. And if
mm.
you're not good at delegating, you're never really going to be good at leading anyway. Because
Yeah,
as a saying, right?
it's the foundation of leadership. So let's do a little bunning trial. I know this
Okay, go ahead.
wasn't planned in the questions I wanted to ask. What do you think keeps capable leaders from delegating?
Fear.
Yeah.
They're just really worried that if man, if I give this task away and if I'm not in charge of it, it's going to go amok. It may have been something that actually happened to them, and so it's
Hmm.
a lesson that they think that they learned. It was more likely they weren't clear about what their expectation was and here's what I need you to do, and then come back to me and creating a really solid foundation for delegation. There's a skill there too. You don't just huck the work off the edge of your desk at the guy and expect that it's or gal and expect that it's going to happen if you haven't given them some clarity about what you expect.
That's
And
where the
that's just
coaching comes in, right? That's where you're
yeah,
coming alongside and saying you want to do that. I've always found like cultures that are not fear-based that allow people to fail forward are easier to delegate because you don't have this immense
right,
pressure on you that, oh my gosh, if
right.
if this doesn't happen, everything is going to, the sky's going to fall.
Yeah. Best military units are when everybody's kind of clear about what they're doing and you tap that person on the head and say, you got this.
Yeah.
This is an important job. Here's the expectation. Holler if you need any help, and I'm going to check in with you at a certain time and kind of see how things are going. And then all of a sudden, then people step up and they go, "Oh, okay, this is my thing to do." And most of the time, they kind of go after it. There's, not always, but
Yeah, and
often enough.
I remember in Carnegie's book, like How to Win Friends and Influence People, he talks about the principle of give people a reputation to live up to. And
Yeah, that's exactly right.
it's so amazing that when we come alongside someone and we say, hey, I believe you can do this. You're going to hit it out of the park. And I know that
Hmm.
you would never, it's almost kind of like reverse psychology. I know that you would never come to this rehearsal like unprepared and that you're going to make all the notes and you're going to
Right.
know what you need to say and where you need to be.
Yeah.
It's so interesting how people pick up on that and they rise to
Hmm.
the occasion.
They do. I don't remember what general it was that said it, or may have been an admiral that don't tell people what to do. Tell them what you need done, and they'll amaze you by their ingenuity.
Oh my goodness. Say that one more time. That's worth
Don't,
repeating.
don't tell them what to do. Tell them what needs doing, and they'll amaze you by their ingenuity.
Mm,
Just
that's so good.
set the task, and then give them the creative license to pull it off. Sometimes it's got to be prescriptive, and that's back all the way back to the beginning of the conversation. If doing it a certain way gets somebody not killed, you owe it to that person to say, don't do it that way, do it this way.
Yeah.
But if it's really, you know, knock yourself out, just figure out how to get it done. Yeah, I think putting trust in people, and I think people tend to lift up more often than not.
And I think we have a general, disposition, many of us do, that when someone believes in us, that gives us the confidence. We want to do well for
Mm,
them. Most people when we tell them that we believe in them, they want to rise to that. They want
yeah,
to they want to show that they're worthy.
that's it. Isn't that discipleship? Isn't that Jesus? And it's that capacity of love that says, go and this is Jesus, Son of God, delegating the church to a bunch of fishermen and a tax collector, right? And a bunch, right? go, and I'm not going to leave you abandoned. I'm going to leave the Holy Spirit with you. I'm going to give you, this is go to the ends of the earth. These are the things I need you to do. And they walked with them for 3 years and they saw how we operated and things like that. But there was there was a clear sense that we're still under that delegation of authority. All authority has been given to me under heaven and earth. Go and do that. That's a great sort of military commander, Jesus coming back on his white horse. The
Right.
commander instruction to the troops to go save the lost.
Yeah. Christian leadership is ultimately about furthering the kingdom. I know you know that. How can worship leaders avoid burnout or ego driven performance? I see this a lot in young people, like ego driven. I got my song, I got my performance, I got my monitor mix. How does this sound? How does that sound? But how can worship leaders avoid burnout and ego driven performance by keeping just the higher purpose in front of them and their team?
Yeah, egos are interesting. In the military, when you're talking fighter pilots,
Right.
right? In some way, ego is really important. And I think this is kind of key. And this applies to musicians too. It takes a certain amount of chutzpah to get up on a stage in front of, pick a couple thousand people and play an instrument with authority and do it deliberately or sing, right? And to bring people into a place of worship as an exercise, that's not easy to do. And so I think acknowledging our best fighter pilots, we go, yeah, they have a nice locker with their name, Speed Man on there, and they get, but um, but you also, as the leader, can step up and say, I want to direct all of that energy most effectively in a particular. So I think you appeal to, you guys are kind of the best of the best right now because God's really given you all a gift. Let's focus that laser on the fact that it's all 5 loaves and 2 fish. Let's be
Mm,
real, right? We're
hmm
all in this together. We're all going to fall short. The glory of God is the outcome. So I think you ultimately got to you acknowledge the gifts and the talents and the strengths that everybody brings, and
hmm
then take everybody to the foot of the cross and realize all these crowns are going to come off and they're going to
Yeah.
go cast at Jesus' feet. So,
It's tough because we live in a culture. Okay, hot take, not a
okay.
popular opinion.
All right.
We live in a culture where like the world shouts at people with talent and says, "You're special, you're special, you're special." The older I get, the less I think special people are. Special, everyone is special to God in the sense that He cares for them,
Sure.
but in the sense of like, I'm different because I can do
Unique. Yeah.
this.
Right.
I got this one thing that sets me apart from other people. That type of thinking of special, I don't know that I really buy that anymore, the older I get. And
Yeah.
and I don't want to destroy someone's sense of self-worth, but what I do think that happens is that when we challenge that, that does put us down at the foot of the cross.
So here's a little tip. Since we're kind of in that vein, military tip: 4P rule:
Okay.
praise in public, pound in private.
Okay.
Right.
Wow, that's
So
great.
if you got to dress somebody, if you praise them, nice job, praise them in front of the group. If you got to, I don't say dress somebody down, but if you have to deflate somebody a little bit, definitely don't do it because all they're going to want to do is defend themselves, right?
Sure.
Catch them offline. That's real common. Again, we're talking whether you're talking military, naval aviators, or Marines or spec op guys or whatever. That was a real good leadership tool, and they're more likely to listen to you
Hmm.
because they're not in front of the rest of the group and they're not worried about being disrespected.
Yeah, I
Respect is
think
a big thing.
yeah, and I think especially with men, and I think
Absolutely.
when I think of the times that I've needed to be pulled aside, which have been many, whether it's been
Mm,
from my father or from people that I've been under their authority, I think I end up respecting them more for doing it privately
yeah.
because of those reasons.
Yep.
Because there's not an embarrassment. This isn't in front of my peers, and you're right. There's a tone that can happen privately that's like, hey, this
Right.
isn't about like me coming down hard on you as much as it
Right.
is me wanting to help you. And
You
you
can
don't
also you have a moment that's free to ask the question. So how do you think it's going?
right,
And get
right.
them to open up a little bit. So here's what I see, and kind of put in that side to side language. Because again, what your goal as a leader is to focus together on this thing that's out here rather than
Yes.
getting confrontational
And
with
and I
them.
love that question when you ask somebody who maybe isn't performing at a level
Uh,
that you think they ought to be. When you ask them, "How do you think things are going?" That actually tests their
it's very
self-awareness.
helpful. Yeah,
It's
it
super
does.
helpful. And I'm always surprised because I've asked that question to some people that I've led,
Hmm.
and I've seen it both ways.
Hmm.
I've seen it ways where they're just oblivious, and
Right.
then I've seen other ways where it's just like they know something's off, but maybe it's in the coaching that I help
Yeah,
put their finger on it.
it's exactly. It's so well put. This goes back to your question about burnout. I see
Mhm.
this as a professor, and we have to constantly keep this in mind, and I know you do too in your roles, that we're other than the handful of paid staff, everybody's volunteers. We all have another life. This is something we do that we're blessed by. It's a tithe of our time, but family issues. They may have just gotten fired from their job. They maybe their kid's been sick. They haven't been able to practice. Maybe they're having gear problems. Last Sunday, I got up and my inners died on me at the beginning of the set. I had
Oh
nowhere to
man.
go, right? Which is kind of the worst thing. So pop it out, and you do your best to just hang with the drummer
Mhm.
and just staring at the MD so he knows. Yeah, but that being having that moment, if there's a question about somebody and taking them aside and asking that question, you may find out, man, I'm glad you asked because I have some really significant things going on. My wife's really sick, whatever it is. And what immediately we should want to do then is pray for them.
Exactly.
Single most important thing we do for a leader is pray for our
Exactly.
people. We pray for our own. God help me do this better. In every situation,
Well, and it also the more information you have,
Mhm.
the different your response will be, right? Like,
Completely right.
if you're pulling that person aside and they're saying, "I'm sorry I didn't come prepared. I lost my grandmother this week. I really didn't want to
Right.
distract the team from that." Of course you're thinking and praying about that. And in most cases, you're going to drop whatever issue it is.
Yeah.
Hey, we can come back to this another time.
Yeah.
And it allows you to dispense the grace that you would want
That's
in a
exactly
moment
right.
like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because as a leader, you're in a position of authority, and grace is what is it? Grace and mercy. Mercy is not getting what you deserve. Grace is getting something as a gift of kindness
Hmm.
that you don't deserve. And I think we have that tiny bit of God-given grace and mercy as a leader, and we have to be very liberal with that.
Yeah.
We don't have the right to withhold
Yep.
any of that any
I,
more
I,
than we right.
I've always been a believer that you dispense grace to the proportion that you have needed and received it yourself.
Right.
And it's very tough.
Yep.
If you've never been broken before the Lord, if you haven't had crisis in your life, if you haven't had a spiritual crisis, a marital crisis, a relational crisis of any sort where you have needed and experienced the unmerited grace of God, it is very difficult for you to want to dispense that.
Right.
It's just a principle in life. You don't really get it until you receive it. And really the truth that should grip all of our hearts is that we have this common grace. Like,
Mm-hmm.
why does the Lord not repay us for the sins that
Mm-hmm.
we commit in the moment that we commit them?
Mm-hmm.
Forget this whole argument about why do bad things happen to good people? Why does God withhold accurate and appropriate
Yeah.
justice
Right.
every
Yeah.
single
That's
day?
R.C. Sproul, man. Holiness of God, right there.
Totally, right?
Yep.
Well, you talk a lot about servant leadership, and
Mm-hmm.
you talk about this concept of leading like Jesus. I'm curious, what's your opinion on this? What does servant leadership look like in the trenches of planning worship, rehearsing,
Mm-hmm.
and leading worship every single week?
Yeah. So Greenleaf, whenever I see somebody talk about servant leadership in a paper or something, or in any kind of setting, Greenleaf is really the one that sort of coined that
Hmm,
year back in the 70s. And I jotted them down because my mind's not that great anymore. But some of these things we already talked about, putting others first.
hmm,
There's a great story about the the commanding general of the Salvation Army, and he wanted to
mm,
put out. Did you hear this? He wanted to put a telegram out
hmm.
for Christmas decades ago, back when we used telegrams, right? And he wanted to encourage the troops. He wanted to give them that vision for the season. and he had like 15 words. He thought he was being very pithy, and he went to the cash office, and it was going to cost a fortune, right? Because back then every letter cost you a, a bit. When it all added up, it was like, I can't afford that. So he keeps whittling away, and he got to one word, which was the only word that he was able to send that he can afford, and the
Hmm.
word was others,
Wow.
right? So you can be very succinct, and if you look at your whole role as a leader is about other people. What's the old saying? If nobody's following you, you're not leading.
Right.
Right? So by definition, if there's no others, you're not in leadership. Um, so that's something. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I just love that in the context of worship leading, because what do worship leaders do? They deflect. They might be using their stage presence, their vocal talent, their playing talent, but they're not using it. That's the whole tension that every worship leader carries, is that they're not using it to draw attention to themselves. They're
Right.
using it to deflect. And I think of the most, you know, respectful leaders that I've been under, they are people that are always making space for others. They're always
Yeah. Well
noting
said.
others. They're
Right.
all praising others.
Right.
They're never drawing attention to themselves. They're
Hmm.
always doing, it just oozes out of them, and how they
Hmm.
perform, how they lead, how they guide a rehearsal, how they guide a service, that they are allowing, deferring to others. It's just
Yeah.
radical deferment.
That, that's radical deferment. One of my favorite slider lately on the Clang, the thing we use to adjust our volumes in our in-ears, is the
Okay.
congregation. I just jack that up anymore. I want to hear everybody sing it.
Is
Second one on
mhm,
Greenleaf, servant leadership, empowerment and development. We talked about that.
sure.
Right behind delegation is equipping, right? How do you
Mm.
develop those people as they're going through that delegated experience? They're learning, and then you can capture those teachable moments. And your goal as a leader ultimately is to be out of a job, right? It's to give eventually everybody is stepped up in those positions, and you can just kind of step back and let everybody kind of lead, and then they're working on the next generation.
And that is so hard sometimes for worship leaders to do, because when they signed up for this, they thought it was all going to be about performing on the platform,
Right,
having a band and a captive audience every week. They love
right,
Jesus and
right.
drawing them to, but when you actually pull back the Monday through Thursday, or,
Hmm.
whatever your work schedule week is, and you actually have to equip people, that's where it
Right.
gets messy.
Yep.
Because that's the 14-year-old that only knows four chords in your
Right.
office, that you're running, stuff that you've been doing for
Right.
10 years.
Right.
And, I'll be honest, like, there's some creatives like that isn't the most enjoyable part of their
Right.
job. But to your
Right.
point, next to delegation, it's the most important part.
Yep.
Who are you replicating yourself in?
Right.
Who are you, giving yourself to, so that
Yeah.
they can grow in their skill?
That's Maxwell's law of replication. If you're not, that's Jesus and again his disciples. Is he didn't just come and then leave. He was here deliberately with partly with the intent of creating a whole bunch of Christians, little Christs, who were gonna do that. Listening and empathy. We talked about that, how important that is, because you don't if you don't make that connection and empathize, people don't care what you think until they think that you care.
It's good. Talk a little bit about what empathy is, because I know some people get that confused with sympathy and feeling bad for someone. What sets
Yeah.
apart empathy, and how could a worship leader practice empathy?
Yeah, it's kind of back to the Goldman thing. I think it's recognizing that people are not just thinking people, but they're emotional people too, and that they have lives, that they've
Mhm.
got things that are working for them and things that aren't. And just we all have feet of clay, and let's just all admit it. And being empathetic to the fact that we're all kind of human. That was a kind of a turnaround in my relationship with Mrs. B, and was realizing we're both trying to, and our parents, you got to settle those things with your parents. Military settings, that guy was where I want to be. He's just trying to figure out how to make it work, you
Mm.
know.
Mhm.
So empathy is a little bit of just putting yourself in somebody else's shoes and being willing to just offer that grace uh, to them. I think that just accept that they're doing their best with what they are, and they may not kind of be, but at least you can give them the benefit of the doubt.
I once heard this illustration, and it really resonated with me, and
Hmm.
I've carried it with me in ministry. Sympathy is like looking at someone who's stuck in a pit, and they're like, "Oh man, that is just really too bad. Hey, I'm sorry that you're
Really
down
sorry
there.
you're down there.
I really hope, and they can be sincere. I really hope that you
Yeah.
can make it out of there. I'm really sorry to see you down there."
Toss them a
Whereas
bottle of water.
Whereas empathy is actually climbing down and
Getting in the
sitting in the
pit. Yeah,
trenches with
I
them
think that's good.
and agreeing with them, just
Yep.
agreeing with them about what the situation is. Yeah, this is really hard. I don't know what that's like for
Yeah,
you.
leadership might be. Did you see that? There's actually a rope over there. I don't know if you thought about, trying to pull yourself up, up, up. Yeah.
Can I help
Um,
you with this rope?
so that goes to his fourth point: Greenleaf on servant leaderhood, stewardship, and integrity for the greater good. Is looking around. Um, where you're constantly realizing that you're God's vehicle for this stuff. That none of this belongs to you. The worship team doesn't belong to you. The church doesn't belong to you. It's all stewardship. The voice is the instrument, and so it kind of takes a lot of the pressure off. In some ways, you can get up that morning before a service and go, "Okay, God, this is your worship team today. I desperately want them to do well. I know you desperately want them to do well because there are people that need to be brought into a place of worship. What is it you need out of me today?" There are days when I got up at Camp Lemonnier and at the Pentagon, and I was going into work, and I have no idea what I'm doing. Way
Mm,
out of my league. When I showed up, I was what they call a frocked captain when I got to the Pentagon, which means I was wearing the uniform, but I was still a commander, and I was rating 15 other guys in the units that were seasoned captains who'd been in that rank for a long time, and I felt like a fraud. And I
imposter
could
syndrome.
Right,
Yeah.
imposter, exactly. So I talked to one of them that I kind of confided, and he said, "God has put you in the seat. Just do whatever He wants you to do, and do your best, and it's going to work out just great." So we're all sort of, I won't say we're all imposters, but it's true that God has put each of us, in a place where we may or may not feel like we're in the right spot. But that's where God has you at that moment. So I think having a stewardship mindset is critical. And the last three, he says, build a community. I would disagree. I would say it's about building a family. I
I
think
agree with that.
community is, I think, kind of a insufficient term for the family of God.
Hmm.
Um, that's another whole podcast. Foresight and vision. We talked about vision and focus, and then a commitment to growth in people. And you're constantly looking for ways that you can disciple and support and help people, and just by being available to them. So Blanchard and Hodges on Lead Like Jesus, they said it. So Jesus is our model.
Hmm.
So if you're not focused on him, you're going to struggle from the get-go, right? As a leader, regardless of the context. I love the first time that I realized I'm reading about the centurion, and he never, when the centurion comes up, right, and he's, my servant is sick, and he runs into a couple of different Roman soldiers, and there's one, he says, be content with your pay. There's another one where he says, man, your faith is really blowing me away right now. He never once criticizes them for being in the military. He never once says, yeah, you really need to take off your sword and your helmet and your all that and
Hmm.
just go get a real job, be a priest or something. He never does that, right?
Hmm.
And I think David was a warrior. I think God has a heart for warriors, just like he has a heart for David was also a musician. I think he has a heart for musicians and the warfare that we do with our
Hmm.
instruments on stage spiritually.
Hmm.
So I think it's got to come back to, you got to start with Jesus as that number one leader, or it's rooted in servanthood. And we have the four things to align. They said heart, head, hands, and habits. And so Blanchard and Hodges, Lead Like Jesus, great book. We're not going to unpack it here, but
That's so good. And going back to stewardship, it reminded me of something that a friend of mine from many years ago used to say. And I think this ought to be the mantra of any worship leader. I own nothing
hmm
and I am owed nothing.
hmm
And I think that, when you come into leadership with that perspective,
hmm
it's going to
open
keep you
hands.
open hands. It's going to
Yeah,
keep you at the feet of Jesus. It's going to keep you with open
yeah,
hands, and it's going to remind you that I am just here to steward something. I tell
yeah.
people I use the analogy of like renting a car. Like all
Mm.
you are is renting a car. There's going to be a day when those keys go to somebody else. And
Right.
do you want to return the car back with a full tank of gas? Is it going to be washed and upholstered on the inside? Is the oil going to be where it needs to
Yeah.
be? But that's all our ministries are. They're just rental cars, in the grand
That's a
scheme of
great
things.
analogy. Yeah, that's stewardship, not ownership. I know one military leader really impressed me years ago, and he said, every morning I get up when I'm praying, and I have this mental image of putting on the yoke. He was a
Hmm.
farmer, and he's like, okay, and then all I want to feel is which way am I being pulled, and I'm just going to pull as hard as I can, but the direction that I go and how fast I go and all that stuff is totally up to the guy who's
To the
hanging on the
master,
rein.
to the
Yeah,
master. And I think that's a great picture of obedience as well.
right.
Like the
Submission and yeah.
yeah, submission. Couple more questions here as we wrap up.
Okay.
What military habits or disciplines, perhaps overlooked in ministry, do you believe could transform how worship leaders lead their teams or structure their ministries if they were to
Yeah.
adopt them?
So, yeah. So, what would be transformational? It's the way we think about ourselves, and I think we've covered a lot of it. But let me tell you a quick story. So, there's this general named Anthony Zinni. He was a Marine,
Hmm.
Marine,
Hmm.
and Tony told a story at the War College, and everybody loved it. We're in the big conference room, and he gets up and he tells the story of his last day on active duty, and he is being retired as a commandant of the Marine Corps, I think, or he was like on the Joint Staff or something like that, or CENTCOM commander. I don't remember, but a big job. The president was there. His relief, the new guy that was going to relieve him, the new Marine 4-star. Pomp and circumstance, bunting everywhere, military bands, all this. It's all done. He's changed command. The new commander is off to the Pentagon doing his job. The president flew off in the helicopter. And he's hanging out. He's talking to his friends, people that had well wishers had come to see him retire and all that. And he looks around he's on the dais and he looks around and he realizes he doesn't have a ride home
Hmm.
because his car drove off with the new guy.
Hmm.
So 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 Tony's telling the story. So everybody's starting to laugh because we're starting to get where he's going. So he goes around the corner and he sees his first class petty officer, who's his yeoman, who was his rider. Hey, Professor Smith, are you busy? You got a car with? Oh, sure, sir. So he got in the kid's Civic, and the kid drove him, the 4-star, formerly a 4-star, now 4-star retired, in his full dress uniform, took him home, dropped him he was still at his quarters, but the moving van's outside. They're starting to pack up the Zinnies to take him to their final duty station where they're moving home. And he walks in the door, and this is the moment everybody loved. And he's standing at the door in the doorway, kisses his wife, Mrs. Z, and he starts patting himself down. And she's like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I'm looking for my phone. I want to let everybody know that I got home."
Hmm.
And she looks and she kisses him on the cheek and she says, "Tony, I don't think they care." And
Hmm.
she walks off.
Oh my
and
goodness.
so everybody in the room is retired, you know, commanders and captains and colonels, and everybody just was laughing because we all knew at that moment he's just Tony,
The transition had happened.
right? I think we're a lot better off if even when we're in that job, if we just say, I'm just God's kid today. I'm not going to worry about, I'm in the role. He's given me something to do. I'm just here to do my best for the next 6 hours or whatever it is, or to prepare this song or whatever it is. And just be humble enough to admit when we stand before the throne, we have no idea what's going to be left of all the great things that we thought that we had done. And I think one of the things where he says, I'm going to wipe every tear from their eyes, is we're going to have a lot of that uh, regret for things that we thought were really important that we've lost, and other things that we regret that we realized, wow, that was a lot more important than I thought.
Hmm.
And if we start at that place of love, when Tony's wife says, it's okay, just you're Tony, that's okay with me.
Yeah.
Uh, I think God can work with us at that point. And he's had a phenomenal career. God bless him. I don't know if he's still with us or not. This is years ago. But Paul wrote, and I jotted this down to share, Jesus said, "Who began a good work in us and will keep doing that until completion." So that means we're all a work in progress,
Hmm.
right? For our spiritual growth, for the congregation's spiritual growth. And so I think our job as a leader is connecting with everybody who's in that is some kind of growth, and figuring out as a leader, what has God given me today to give to that person to get them into that next place that they need to be at. That's
Hmm.
probably the most important thing I think we do as leaders. And amazingly, God, all the times we're doing that for other people, He's back there kind of just doing it to us as by default.
So good. I agree with that.
I
Last
hope that's
question.
helpful.
It
Yeah.
is. If you were coaching a worship leader to build a high functioning worship team based on your military experience, what would be your top 3 tips?
Okay. First one is pray.
Hmm.
Second one is pray.
I think I know where this is going.
Pray for wisdom for
Hmm.
yourself. Pray for your people every day.
Hmm.
Pray for everybody, up and down, leadership up, your whole team. If you know specific needs, pray for those. And
And
then
isn't
pray.
isn't it also
Yep,
important not to just pray for your team, but to pray with your team?
absolutely.
Like that takes on a there's a
No,
different dynamic.
maybe. I think they expect that. We're in the
Hmm.
group and, we pray together, go team. But when I find out as a humble musician that the worship team leader was specifically praying for me this week because he knew this song was
Hmm.
a challenge for me,
Hmm.
to me, just as a guy, that means more to me.
Yeah.
Um, when I when I would tell one of my troopers, "Hey man, I know your wife's been really sick. Really been praying for her. How's that going?" That's a bigger deal than us getting in a circle in a room, and praying as a group. I think you do that
Mm.
too, right? Because
Hmm.
you're praying for
Hmm.
unity and that. But I think the power of a praying wife, was it Omardian wrote that book
Yeah.
about,
Stormy O'Mardian.
right? I think that applies to the power of a praying leader. You should
Oh
write that
yeah.
book. I think it'd be great.
Stormy might have written that. I don't know.
I'd read
I know
it.
she
Yeah,
did a
I'd read it.
series of them.
So I think that's the place you start. We forget to pray for people in authority over us. Pray. I think it's okay to pray for favor,
Hmm.
and to pray for excellence in what you do, and pray for the wisdom. Just cry out for that wisdom, and God's really good, and He's given me that in in many, many, many different ways. I'm really blessed
Yeah.
that way for sure. You
Don,
included.
oh, thank you. You're kind. Don, this has been incredible. This has been like just a master class of what worship leaders can learn from a military leader like yourself. And man, I love that you've had your feet in both worlds. You were a leader, you're a proven leader, you are a leader, you continue to lead in your local church. You teach on leadership
Mm.
and you also serve amongst other leaders. So I just want to thank you for just giving your insights on this. I think there's so much richness in so much of what you had to say, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, Travis. Been my honor, brother. I love you like a brother. Thanks for everything.
Love you, bro.
All right. Talk to you soon.